Data at the point of need, Mike. That was your idea. What's the vision behind delivering data at the point of need?
I want to get all of the patient data into a single place. And that's not just the clinical data, it's the administrative data as well. Everything in one place, because if I don't get everything into one place, I can't sift it and deliver it back to the point where the clinicians need it for treating the patients.
And is that really that important? Does a clinician, when he's delivering patient care, need access to all of that data?
Yeah, absolutely. It's about managing stress. How much stress is caused trying to find data from disparate sources? How much stress is given to patients while consultants try and find information and explain problems to them at the bedside or in the consulting room? So reducing that stress is what it's all about. The data is eminently out there. It's in other systems. I want to bring it together into a single location so that it's there when you need it for your patient.
How exactly are you going to go about realising this vision, Mike?
Pulling all the data into a single place. That's the first step. Trying to get a complete view of all the data so that we can report against it. The other issue is making sure that we can push the data out again to the point where it's needed. Sometimes that's back to a department, sometimes it's specifically to a clinician, sometimes it's to an aggregated record. But without having the data all in the same place, or at least being able to pull the data down to a common location, we can't achieve our goal.
What's stopping you from being able to do that? What are the biggest challenges in being able to bring the data to the clinician at the point of need?
Vendor neutrality, or its lack. You'll hear a lot in the market about interfaces which are open standards or common standards, or how vendors say that their data is available to anybody else. Most of these situations are a myth. In reality, most standards are poorly implemented by disparate suppliers, and that vendor neutral solutions tend to be neutral where it looks at other vendors but not where it looks at themselves. A lot of the vendors will work to things like HL7, XML, but they all work to it slightly differently. Some organisations will try and drive you to their almost proprietary data storage. PAC solutions are an obvious example, but they're not alone. A lot of hospital information systems try and drag you to a central place, and it's not being dragged. It's about keeping steadfast and saying, I want complete neutrality on my data warehouse.
I guess we're not just talking about PACs. You have many more applications across the clinic that all presumably produce similar types of data, DICOM data, image data, that are all implemented somewhat differently from each other.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of sort of JPEG type image files, cameras from different systems that you want to take a snapshot of somebody and store that medically, all the way through to email. All of those different environments all have their own storage problems, whether it's just because of the nature of the way you store the data and how you retrieve it, whether it's vendor neutrality, but they all have a problem inherently with the fact that they're different systems and they're storing data in a different way. The other major challenge is getting a way of accessing the data and pulling it into a central location in an efficient way. People talk about archiving and disaster recovery and data marts and all those good things. I like to talk about a membrane, a vehicle by which, or a vehicle by which you can extract data from a source environment and place it somewhere where it's going to be available in the event of a problem. It's going to be available in the event of a complete disaster, loss of system or service, and it's also going to be available for you to mine to do useful things with. The sort of things it's really useful for is being able to create a patient record on the fly from real-time data, because that data has been pulled from the source systems for a number of other reasons, but it's there, so why not use it?
And have you identified a way of actually being able to deliver this data to the clinician?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be sat here if I hadn't got at least the beginnings of a solution. To say that I'd completely solved the problem would be wrong, simply put. I'm almost there, and as long as the industry doesn't continue to throw more interesting applications into the mix all the time, I'd probably get to a completed solution within the next 12 months. The trick for me has been to find a vendor scenario which I can leverage across my other applications. We have a hospital information system which relies on a third-party product to both do the archiving of the data, provide me with the disaster recovery solution, and also to do my basic backup. That application that it's working with is incredibly proprietary. It's a completely separate architecture, but needs to work in the real Intel type world. So the application that we're using is in itself vendor neutral. So by leveraging that application across my other environments, I've been able to build out more and more accesses into my data mart, both in terms of retrieving data from systems, but also being able to dip back in and get the data out.
And that's across everything, or ultimately your vision will be that delivers across all of the
I'm reluctant,
ologies and oscopies out there.
I'm very reluctant to say everything, and always, because there's always somebody out there that's going to knock you off your perch. But within the field of vision that I have, yes, I mean, it ticks all the major boxes. My major, as you put it, ology applications, my endoscopy department, ophthalmology, cardiology, those sorts of people, they're all in the mix. My home-built scanning application, that's in the mix as well, and that's a cache-based system. So yeah, we'll deal with all sorts of different backends, along with the hospital information system itself, PACS of course, and good old Exchange, the Exchange databases, the file and print stuff, all of that's in the mix.
And that will be able to provide and realise the vision that the clinician may be able to access any patient data that he feels he needs to be able to examine when he's delivering the patient care.
Yeah, I would obviously caveat that with as long as it's correctly coded. I mean, one of the things we sometimes get asked to do is to retrieve data which is almost unretrievable. By having a vendor neutral environment, at least you've got half a chance of going to get that data, even if it's not part of your normal classification. So if it's not got name, date of birth, postcode, all that usual stuff associated with it, but is in a space where you can mine that data, then even if it isn't directly related to the patient incident, the patient care, you might be able to find that data if you have this holistic view of the data.
You made reference to paper, and obviously we have this dream and vision of all healthcare organisations to go paperless. What about historical documents? Are you looking to digitise those, make those available through the same sort of patient pathway or whatever it is you're looking to create?
It's a building blocks piece. We have addressed the paper problem. Everything that we produce on paper is scanned and retained for future viewing, and that system has been in the clinic for a while and works very well. The images that are produced from radiology, again, large quantities of those, that technology is well understood. There are images produced in other departments, ophthalmology, endoscopy and so forth. All of those images, whether they're scanned documents or medical images, have to be managed long term. But I've got, at least in the top of my head, 4 different providers, all of whom manage images. So I need to break down my data into a lower level and say, I'll store all my images offline in my big SQL database, and I'll look at them from a departmental point of view through my membrane. So within the department, they think that all the images are there and they're all theirs. But from the wider point of view, they're all in a place that I can get to them easily. Whether that be for a long-term archiving perspective or whether it be for me to be able to go and mine that data to produce a comprehensive record, doesn't matter. I'm sitting that data behind the proprietary environment so that I can both maintain it for lengthy periods but also make it available in an appropriate way.
It sounds like there's a buzzword in the industry which we've had for many years, information lifecycle management. I mean, is that what we're talking about here, Mike? The ability to manage data throughout its life cycle?
Yes. I mean, information lifecycle management, I can't even say it, sounds, again, like a big one-size-fits-all. And I'm very reticent to say one size does fit all. What I'm more interested in saying is one pot of glue can glue everything together. Because we can't predict what the life cycle of information is. I mean, we all carry smartphones around with us now and have a myriad of data on them. 10 years ago, that wasn't possible. So I'm more keen on saying that I have data which is available when I need it, that is appropriately archived so that I don't gum up the works. And in the event of a loss of a system or the loss of a building, I can access that data from another location.
And I guess it's not just an issue within the hospital, but you've talked about the ability to sort of extract data from multiple sources, but I assume you have to share that data with other institutions outside of your own hospital?
We do. We have a different set of challenges from something like the National Health Service, where there's perhaps a more inclusive view of data. Ours is much more of an exclusive view of data. So not only do we need to share information with trusted third parties, we need to be very specific about segregating data from untrusted third parties to some level of detail. So we can allow consultants to see radiology remotely. That's not a problem. We can share radiology remotely with individual consultants in that particular field. But where we're dealing with pathology, patients going to adjacent doctors for tests, the doctors mustn't be aware that the patient has actually been to the other guy, so to speak. So you get some aspects of data security which are inclusive and some which are very exclusive, and we have to deal with that all at the same time.
So you mentioned disaster recovery. That's clearly also a very important, if you like, side benefit or additional benefit that you can address whilst managing your data effectively. The ability to have that available in the event one hopes. Keep on fingers crossed that there isn't such a thing. But in this day and age, who knows? That's an important consideration for the clinic, presumably, is to have that business continuity plan in place.
Yeah, it's a tricky one to build, because unlike a lot of other businesses, you can't up sticks and suddenly work the hospital from another location. So you've got two drivers. One is, if I lose a system which supports a critical part of the hospital, can I recover that system and still provide continuous patient care? So that's a high availability solution. It's not disaster recovery. Real disaster recovery is about being able to continue to trade in the event of complete catastrophe. But a hospital can't do that. No. So what I'm looking for there is the ability to be able to recover patient critical data to whoever we're handing the care off to under those unfortunate circumstances the next day or within a reasonable amount of time. So my approach is really more about high availability in the short term, and then long-term recoverable archive, so that I can use tools and copies of existing applications to get back to that data. The focus has to be on making sure that if a critical system fails, that all the data is available to some alternative environment so that that can be got to very quickly. Sounds like you're on your way, Mike, to achieving that. It's going to be an interesting journey over the next few years. How do you see that panning out? What do you think the business benefits are going to be when you are 3 years down the path of implementing this vision of yours? I think there are a number of benefits. Obviously, the clinician's ability to be able to be paperless, both in the context of working within the clinic, but also when they're working in their own practices. A lot of our doctors quite like the idea of being able to work their practices on the run, so to speak, or from other locations. So the ability to service my customers, my doctors, is key. Long term, it's dragging all that data in. It's getting everything in. So it's saving money on storage. It's being able to provide the availability spectrum. People talk about disaster recovery and high availability and backup. I think they're all part of the same thing, but it's being able to get that spectrum to work right for the user. Mm-hmm. And to try and almost make my own magic cloud, not just an ordinary cloud, magic cloud, where all the data is in there somewhere, and you don't need to know exactly where it is, but it's always going to be there when you need it.
Mike, you yourself said that you operate predominantly in the private healthcare market. Obviously, there are a lot of colleagues at the moment facing challenging times in terms of what they're trying to deliver within the NHS framework. What advice would you have for a CIO or IT director who might like to embark on the same path that you've started on in this particular respect?
It's very easy for me, being on the outside of this, to pass comment because I don't have to live with the consequences. I think the first thing to think about is how to deal with accessing that data, where the rules are going to change within the NHS over the next years, and when nobody's sure how that's going to play out. But to look at something like PACS as an obvious problem, how does one manage vast quantities of data, and how does one get access to that without having to spend significant amounts of money with providers on proprietary solutions? So if one looks at that specific one, the vendor independence in terms of storage, PACS has a story to tell, but that story still plays out. If you go into the right solution, it will play out across any other proprietary system. So look at that layer and say, how can I manage a tenfold increase in the data that I'm currently storing without having to spend millions and millions of pounds with a particular vendor and then not be able to get access effectively to that same data. We've worked with a lot of vendors that also work in the NHS, and we find regularly that there is a tremendous sort of drag back to the vendor in terms of managing data. You know, we will aggregate your data for you. Where does the other data exist? We'll put it into our systems. And everybody's pulling you in different directions. By adopting this kind of membrane approach, you can go to a more industry standard view of your data, portalized view, and there are lots of products in the marketplace that will look at that data for you. You can go to that view and keep those vendor-specific solutions above that membrane. And I think that will give you flexibility both in terms of managing that data, but also where you have to change elements of your proprietary solutions. If you want to change packs, if you want to change path, anything else. All of your history data is still held in the data mart. You still have access to it. So you can flush data into it and not be caught on the horns of a problem saying, oh, you know, if we move to so-and-so and such application, how do we get access to the history? How does the patient record flow through that? Well, you can fix it by doing this.
I think you're right, and talking to a number of those IT directors in the NHS, they're trying to impose themselves upon a framework that really has looked at things in terms of independent department, independent applications. That's a lot of the time where the money is in terms of being able to spend, and therefore they're trying to take a more horizontal and more enterprise-wide approach to the management of data, very much in the way that you've started to here.
I would almost be counterintuitive here and say that I think it's a good thing that the departments are going in their own directions, banging their own drum. I think I would empower departments to go it alone. What I think you're going to wind up having to spend your bucks on is the membrane layer, and both in terms of the application interfaces, the integration, but also producing the right level of metadata to push the rest of the stuff into your data mart. Then management reporting at a clinical and a back office level will fall very easily out of that data mart. So electronic medical record, medical portal, hospital activity management, all that stuff can be reported very much more easily out of that back end without you having to worry about, oh, I need a PAS that does X, Y, and Z, or I need a HIS that does X, Y, and Z, or does my radiology department talk to pathology? You don't need to care.
Mike, thank you very much. It's been an interesting insight into how the clinic is providing data at the point of need. Thanks very much indeed for your time, Mike.
You're welcome.